Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Friday. It makes it a friendly Friday, which means we'll have the real Steve Friend on momentarily. I'm wearing my war shirt today. I'm wearing an OD Green Suspendables merch shirt with my buddy Garrett's logo on there. For some reason, when we went live, Facebook didn't want to load. I have no idea what that means. That might be a harbinger of interesting things to come. I only say that because nobody watches us on Facebook. Pretty sure that we're totally banned there. But maybe our NSA friends have decided to tune in and catch some actual truth and picking behind the curtain. So we'll have a little bit of fun today. Let's see. First of all, I want to thank all the people that joined us for the live call-in show, including the debacle of me not giving permission to a microphone on a software that I was unaware I needed to do. So we had a lot of fun last night. We got to talk to some of our listeners. If you guys have not joined us over on Locals, now would be a great time to join us. We're going to have a lot of fun there, and you can leave voicemails. The only way you get the number to call into the studio each month is going to be going to Local. So you can go to KyleSeraphin.com. It's KyleSeraphin.com. That's KyleSeraphin.com. Yeah, let's go ahead and read our stuff first. We learned on air with you. If anybody had any doubt of whether or not this was a one-man operation, you got to see the one man, the one monkey behind the curtain, like pulling all the levers and hoping that one of them would work. And actually, I had a ton of fun doing it because my buddy Garrett was there to laugh with me through it. And our first caller of the day was Rose, or of the night rather, was Rose Lopez from our chat, who is awesome, and we really appreciate it. So that was a great moment. I think a good kickoff and a good proof of concept. So join us over there. The community is the best community that I'm aware of, the nicest people with the most interesting things to talk about. Before we bring Steve on, let's do a quick ad read for our friends over at My Patriot Supply. Folks, you know that if people come after my family, actually, I get some threats every once in a while, I'm going to be ready. That doesn't just mean with money. That means with food. That means with being able to bunker down. That's why we rely on My Patriot Supply, and we've got a big closet full of it. You can get their mega 3-month emergency food kit, which is jam-packed with 33 varieties of long-lasting 25-year sealed foods. That's a good idea. You never know what might be coming our way. This doesn't just include the creamy flavored rice. It also has old-fashioned spaghetti and a cheesy broccoli soup, which probably is really tasty if you're starving. That's the whole point. You're going to get a bonus protein kit. It's going to have diced beef, flavorful chicken, and a variety of beans. Plus, you're going to get snacks, 9 different fruits, vegetables, and the snacks in there all in one. It is the mega pack, which means it's got 2,500 calories per day, which is more than the USDA recommends you need to eat, but it's probably what you actually eat. Keeps you well fed, ready for anything for a 90-day period. It is your duty as an American to protect your family, so make sure that you guys are doing that. That starts with food you can depend on. Go to Prepare Like Kyle. I got to tell you where to go. PrepareLikeKyle.com. PrepareLikeKyle.com. Save $300 right now on the mega 3-month emergency food kit. I've got the scaled down version of it. They ship really, really fast. It gets there on time, so make sure you guys do that. PrepareLikeKyle.com. If you haven't figured out what your emergency food situation looks like, if you're not seeing the shenanigans, they're coming. And you know who else is here? That guy. Welcome to the program this morning, Mr. Steve Friend.
Pleasure to be here as always. What's the almond content in the supply there? Is it hefty? Would it suffice for me for like, I don't know, a year and a half because I go off of one a day?
Yeah, no, I think you could go for a decade. It lasts for up to 25 years, so you're good. In almond power, it's really high. Can we convert things from food, like based on calories, into almond power, just based on the ratio of fats and carbs that are in almonds?
Well, we're working on the Garrett O'Boyle's over meter on American Radicals podcast. That'll have to be Project B.
What is the Boyle's over meter? Is that how amped up he is?
How quickly I can black pill him. Normally it's 3 to 6 minutes, but sometimes I'm really in a groove and I can get it done in 90 seconds.
All right, so I mentioned the local show, and this is a good moment. We had a caller on last night, and thanks to Brittany for calling in and being one of the brave people that picked up the phone and chatted with us. And what she said is, I'm not really that familiar with Garrett O'Boyle, which made me realize a couple of things. One, the Suspendables brand is broader than some people realize. And two, not everybody knows about the American Radicals podcast, which is your 3 times a week show. Can you give people a pitch? Tailored to Brittany. She's in Florida with you. So maybe you can tell Brittany about our buddy.
Brittany, you need to come on to the AMRAD pod, the American Radicals podcast, rumble.com/AMRADpod. We come live to you Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Tuesday and Thursday, we lead into your show, so 08:30 Eastern time, and Saturday's noon time start so that everyone can sleep in a little bit. And we normally like to go back and forth, Garrett and I. We talk about not necessarily like breaking news of the day, but just a little bit deeper analysis. And if you listen to Garrett O'Boyle talk for more than 3 minutes, you will get a biblical worldview. And I think that I've learned a lot from him, and the audience really appreciates that. So join us and then share it with a friend or 12.
Yeah, a dozen. There should be like an AMRAD dozen. We should figure out what that number looks like. It's probably like 3. Okay, so let's do some fun stuff. Where do you want to start? Because I'm going to give you some opportunities. We're going to go through the following topics. We're going to talk about a little bit about the Hunter Biden plea, which I thought was interesting only because they offered one thing that I'd never heard of before, and maybe you have. We're also going to talk about FARA and sort of the nature of that DOJ indictment that came down for the Russians, which they're not going to do, but Tim Pool and some of the others got kind of like rolled into. So I've got I got a great graphic for you, by the way, on that. And then I've got geofence warrants, which was something that was decided in 2 different circuits last month. And so we could talk about those. What order would you like? I'm going to let you.
We got to go with the princeling, Hunter Biden, because I think that there's a whistleblower connection there too.
Okay, that's fair. So let's do this. Boom. There's I have to search through my tabs. Judge accepts Hunter Biden plea change, staving off trial. Do you know that he actually entered a different plea than guilty?
He tried to go with the Alford plea, which is like pleading no contest. Like, I will accept the consequences of the actions, but not admit guilt, which I think every child is probably going to try now in the household.
They're going to actually, if this gets wide enough, they'll say, I'd like to enter an Alford plea.
You can punish me. I'm just not going to say I'm sorry. I mean,
right.
That seems like a high school vice principal sort of negotiation that will go on with a problematic student.
Let's play the little clip here of them walking him into the courtroom, and then we'll kind of discuss what actually ends up happening.
Of course, as expected, the Justice Department does not agree with this. They objected in court to this request from Hunter Biden's attorneys, and now the judge has called for a break for a couple of hours while he considers what steps to take next. Now, this is unusual, as I pointed out. Today, obviously, was the first day of jury selection on this trial. This is Hunter Biden's second time going on trial. Earlier this year, he was found guilty on gun charges in Delaware. And these charges have to do with tax evasion. And he's facing 3 felony counts for tax evasion, 6 misdemeanor counts for failing to file and pay his taxes on time.
So there you go. He tried it, and then he had to change his mind because the default position for DOJ is that we do not accept Alford pleas.
That's pretty bad negotiating skills. You just roll in there and say, look, I'm going to put this on the table. And then they just shake their head and they walk back with their tail between their legs and say, okay, we'll just plead guilty to everything. I mean, it was a final ditch effort. And I think that's good on the DOJ. It's a good policy to have. It's very much in line with, we don't negotiate with terrorists. The strength of our case, we're not going to bring it forward unless we feel like we're going to win at trial. And sort of add on to the Bill Shipley statement. He said, I believe in a fair process, but I think he articulated it really well, where he says that as a line prosecutor, as an assistant United States attorney, when you go into court, whether or not you win or lose isn't on you and your abilities as a lawyer. It's the facts. Do the facts support the conviction? If they don't support it, then it's not a commentary on your ability to litigate a case. It's just the facts don't. And you would think that the federal government would only bring cases forward if the facts supported a conviction, which they very clearly had here.
Yeah, that's why I feel so good about them deciding to bring forward cases on Donald Trump about the classified document nonsense.
I'm very confident that they'll be fully funded, though, in a couple weeks by the Republicans.
This is the problem that we keep trying to bring up. Everyone's acting like this is like some sort of unilateral decision by a king, and it's not, because the GOP actually has a say in this, and they continue to have a say in this. Actually, didn't have it on my agenda, but Mike Lee yesterday tweeted out something, because there's a potential government standoff or a shutdown that could happen over this bill, essentially taking ownership of it on behalf of conservatives who would be totally okay with not seeing a federal government in operation. Like, don't give them any money.
Government shutdowns, for whatever reason, the uniparty negotiates in Washington, D.C., the fault is always on the Republican Party. So they are terrified of that premise. And nobody ever articulates it in a way that I think makes the case in favor of a shutdown. So, you and I would be wholly in favor of, let's just defund the FBI entirely. But we're more pragmatic in Washington, D.C., right? We have to get along with these people. So how about just a significant cut in their ability to put grandmas who pray at abortion centers in prison?
And why don't we just shut down the Civil Rights Division? That seems to be the one that really sucks. Like,
that's acceptable. So let's say the Civil Rights Division gets shut down. And every time the Republicans cave and fully fund it, that is them saying that it's better to have the DOJ going after 89-year-old women praying in an abortion clinic rather than a temporary partial government shutdown. That's the way it needs to be articulated, and no one ever says it. They always just say, well, we can't have a government shutdown. We're gonna lose the election. Well, I don't know. You never tried it. Why don't you give it a whirl? Seems like your side really doesn't like the government, and that would be a bonus for you.
Government workers are really good about voting for pro-government positions. So they're not voting for conservatives. They're certainly not voting for Republicans in general. My thought is something along the lines of, why don't we have some Socratic discussion? It's like, we can't shut down the government. Why?
Interesting. Why?
How about, it's like, okay, tell me more. It's my favorite thing when someone says something that I think is completely absurd. Tell me more. Tell me more about what this government does, and allow yourself to make the argument, because the argument default position should not be that the government is good and it's open. That's the opposite of what Americans thought for all of America until recently. So how about we just let it go? And then you show me, because here's the thing, people have lived through government shutdowns, and outside of government employees, they didn't know it. Their job still worked. McDonald's is still slinging hamburgers, right? Target is still open and doing tuck kits for kids or whatever it is they sell. Walmart's open for business. Costco is still getting major shipments. You can get a pallet of rice, or you can get a pallet of honey, or whatever the heck it is that you're into, all over this country, because it has nothing to do with the federal government. The trucks are running. The trains are on time. The federal government is the thing that stops us from doing that stuff most of the time.
Let them say what the government actually did do, what our ex-girlfriend actually did do in the last week. So this is what we found out that the FBI did in the last week. They knew about the shooter in Atlanta and didn't address that. And I mean, look, I'll give them even a benefit of the doubt in that. They get 2,500 tips a day. They give it to locals. Might have been a local fail. We found out that they knew what was in the Trannifesto in Nashville and hid it and said it was a blueprint for Armageddon. But it was really just an ode to transgenderism and white privilege. We found out that they are not adequately addressing child sex abuse cases. And we found out after 55 days of investigating the Trump assassination attempt, they failed to tell us that most of the people on the protective detail only had 2 hours of web training, but they did indict some Russians in Russia committing cyber crimes against Ukraine and Hamas. But we should definitely give them $12 billion.
This is the point, folks. This is how we make it. Let's go ahead and dive into the pool thing, because I think it's fun. Okay, so I don't know why I'm calling it the pool. This is the funniest thing that I found yesterday. They had to pull this picture. If you're watching, so this is a picture of Dave Rubin, who left Tenet Media already. Benny Johnson, who I guess was doing an arm's length deal, but got paid $100,000 a month or something like that for one video at a time. And Tim Pool, except I don't know who that is.
That's definitely not Tim Pool.
It's just definitely
a guy
not Tim
with
Pool.
The beanie cap.
It's a guy with the wrong color beanie and the wrong color beard that they just threw up there and claimed. And then if you look, you ever notice that whenever you list people on photos, like organized human beings that have real thought processes, they'll be like, from left to right, the following people are in this picture. Like pictured above, left to right. So pictured above, they have Tim Pool, which is actually Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin, where the picture is just like some Japanese guy with a beanie on. And Benny Johnson. Benny Johnson is the only person actually represented by his own picture. Everything about this is coming from The Guardian. Very silly, really funny to me. I don't know why that made me happy so much, but it made me happy to just realize how goofy these people are. And the claim was essentially, and there's a lot of money involved, that the Russians came and they talked to Lauren Chen and her husband. And Lauren Chen is like this person who was raised in Hong Kong, and she's a Canadian citizen. She is a Turning Point contributor, and she's a Blaze contributor and some other stuff. Her YouTube channels got nuked, by the way, probably by her, but it's gone. I went looking for it this morning. Absolutely gone. So you've got a lot of money floating out there. And what we found out yesterday was Seb Gorka said they approached him in February of 2023, which I found very interesting. Did you see that, by the way?
Yeah, I saw that he put that statement out, and he actually did some vetting of that and wasn't comfortable with it and refused to go along. And Seb's a pretty savvy guy, so good on him.
Yeah, they said, he's like, but where's the money coming from?
Kyle Serafin.
And they were like, no, it's not Kyle Serafin. It's actually a guy in Hungary who's working for a Czech auto parts manufacturer, and he's a made-up person that you can't find. And Seb's like, that sounds very suspicious. I'm not going to do it. Even though the money sounds quite good, I will not do it. So he didn't do it. So good on Seb Gorka. That's the way you do it. And then there was this backlash online. People are like, why didn't you tell other people about it? It's like, do you think that we all know each other? Number one, like I've been on Tim Pool's show 3 times. I've been up there 3 times, twice to his old place and once to the new one. I don't have Tim's number, nor do I need it. I don't require it. I know some of the numbers for the producers. I could get back and forth. But if somebody sent me a shady deal, how would you know that they approached Tim Pool with it? How would you, and are you going to go out there and be like, hey, I got a shady deal. I don't know what it means. I'm going to go blast it across the internet. That doesn't sound like something Seb Gorka would do either. Caveat emptor, folks. Buyer beware. You're getting paid. You only get to sell your reputation one time. That's kind of why you and I operate the way we do, I would think.
And I think a lot of the content creators, they're focused on producing content out there. They want to have a quality program and a show, and maybe they just kind of outsource that responsibility of negotiating to some sort of agent or an assistant to that regard. And that person might not have the expertise, because this is sort of a influx industry at this point. People are getting in, and a lot of them will just catch on and catch success right away. They're not necessarily grifting. They just are inexperienced in this field. And I think Seb comes from a different position where his background's in national security. He's naturally
way more
cynical and skeptical, whereas Benny Johnson might not be. I don't know Benny Johnson. I don't have Benny Johnson's phone number. I've never contacted him or any of his people. Again, there's not these connections in the world. Just because people have a career in content creation doesn't mean that they're all like sitting around the coffee lounge later on in the day from the central hub.
That's true. The other thing is, though, I will say that I think probably Tim has his hands on the lever. Based on watching him interact and run his show, I think he probably has his hands on the lever, and that's fine. But we did some estimation when I was sitting with Ryan Matta, who actually does have a pretty good background of understanding what kind of money can be generated by channels, particularly in the YouTube sphere. But we were doing just some basic numbers, and it was looking like $20,000 to $50,000 might be generated out of any given show. I mean, there's several $1,000s in just people doing super chats and Rumble rants and things like that coming out of there. So there's a lot of money involved. And the idea that somebody would pay you $100,000 a week is a lot. But I think they're making more than that before they got there. They were making a ton of money. They've been making a ton of money doing this. So that kind of money sounds wild, except when you know how much money is actually being thrown at them.
When you work in that industry, I mean, it's like people that will criticize a billionaire, like a Jeff Bezos, and be like, can you believe how much his house costs? I'm like, do you know how little $100 million is to Jeff Bezos? I mean, he can do that in a few minutes on Black Friday of Amazon sales. So, yeah. Like, perspective on what these facts and figures are. And I think that's also the fact that we're revealing that these people are likely victims, right? They're not suspects in this case.
I have a hard time calling them victims, but yes, under the way that the FBI, I would say that they were targeted, which is what they would call it in the Bureau. This is where I wanted to go with this, because there's some really interesting information out there. I don't think you ever dealt with FARA. Is that correct?
I didn't. I've learned more from you on this and how it was basically unenforced until it became politically expedient, which stands to reason that that's what they're doing writ large across the Department of Justice and FBI.
For sure. And so, folks, this is what I wanted to kind of explain. There's a couple things. I don't need to make excuses for any of these people because I don't cover for them, and I don't think very highly of Benny Johnson. I actually think pretty lowly of him, and I've had people, including folks that I don't get along with anymore, that warned me and said he's not a good person. So I have actually told off his producer, who had a conversation with me one time and tried to tell me how things were. And it's like, I don't work for you and you should watch yourself because I'm way meaner than you can imagine. But the idea that FARA would be used is very strange to me. So this is a thing that one of you sent me online, coming in off the X lines, and it was a 2016. This is prior to my FBI time, and this is why I have a problem with it. This was a findings by the Department of Justice OIG, a report on the enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. I accidentally called it Foreign Alien Registration Act, I think, the other day, but Foreign Agents Registration Act, or also known as FARA. There is an office in Washington, D.C. that I have sat in, and the people who run that office are attorneys, and they are the prosecutors, the AUSAs, and so on, that work for DOJ. So I've sat with those people, and I did so in 2018 after this findings was released, 2 years later. And what I found out is that this is probably true. This is the most interesting piece of this little thing. It's a bullet point. It's very small, so I'm going to read it for you, Steve. It says, investigative agents and NSD, National Security Division officials, do not appear to agree about the intent of FARA or what constitute a FARA case. Investigators we spoke to generally believe that the investigations conducted pursuant to a separate criminal provision, 18 U.S.C. 951, were FARA cases, whereas the national security officials believe that Section 951 and FARA are intended to address different criminal types of activities. Specifically, national security describes Section 951 as targeting information gathering and other espionage-like activities on behalf of a foreign government, and FARA is more about registration and disclosure by foreign agents that are involved in legal activities such as lobbying, tourism, and economic development. And that actually is true, because FARA is really supposed to be about lobbying, economic development, tourism, commercials. I'll give you an example. If you, Steve Friend, were to take money and go produce a commercial on behalf of the government of Qatar that said, come to Qatar, it's an amazing place, sponsored on behalf of the American Tourism Bureau, and you were the ones from the American Tourism Bureau, as the American Tourism Bureau, you would have to register under FARA to say that you are actually taking money from a foreign government to advocate for that position. So that's what FARA is supposed to do. It's hard to say that if somebody is doing content creation and they are giving their opinions, and those opinions happen to be in line with some foreign government that's giving money through a cutout, that you're actually guilty of FARA. So I don't think they're in danger of that, but I will tell you this. These are state media organizations, right? Russia Today, the RT folks are state media, which means that they're going to be affiliated with the Russian government, which means I can get a 702 on you. I can get a 702 on them, and I can 1 or 2 hop my way to the people that they're dealing with. So if Russia Today individuals who were indicted had 702 coverage on them, and I'm confident that that would be a very easy write-up for me, so I'm sure they probably have something similar. They might even have like a full FISA, but it's easier to do a 702. If they did that, then they can 1-hop to Lauren, and they can 1-hop from there to anybody that she was in contact with.
And they can even expand that, because they could say that the RT folks were attempting to contact and recruit Americans, and then they could become subjects of counterintelligence investigations, which gives you an extra hop at that point. And that's the way that they can weaponize the entire process. I mean, look, we don't know the facts and circumstances, the validity of this case, but I will say the timing of it and the fact that, I guess they were saying that they're targets of this investigation, these content creators. They're putting these numbers out there to besmirch their reputations and create some heartache for them, create a chilling effect. This is a weaponized police force, a secret police force, the FBI, going after independent media and using the levers of power that they have at their disposals to do it, because otherwise you can't explain to me the timing of this. It doesn't coincide with anything other than, it's 8 weeks to an election. Maybe we can get them to shut up as they go into October.
I think it also has to do with this, which I put up on Twitter yesterday. This is a welcome distraction from the former aide to the New York governor, 2 different governors charged as an agent of the Chinese government. Obviously, we know about the Dianne Feinstein things. We know about Swalwell's connection, which are predating his time in national office. But there are some very disturbing connections that continue to happen between the Democrat Party and the Chinese, who we seem to be kind of being gentle with. And of course, there's a reason why people were making all these sort of slurs against Biden. Of course, Tim Walz also has some strange connections to China. So it's a nice distractor to say Russia, which I think is the lesser threat of the major counterintelligence threats in this country, based on my time working in counterintelligence. They're the lesser of those threats. Meanwhile, Democrats are involved very deeply with the Chinese Communist Party. And it's not through influencers or some guy who hangs out on a podcast studio in West Virginia. It's literally the politicians' main offices. They are far better at doing the infiltrations, and there's way more of them because they've absolutely infiltrated our university system. And that's open source stuff, folks.
And I think that there's the narrative of the Russia part part 3 now, because it's the third presidential election cycle that they're going to be doing and pushing this out on. And you combine this revelation here where they're going after Tenet, and then they're saying that Russia is this big bad, so we need to indict people while they're in Russia still who are doing cyber crimes. And I go back to and I have to issue the qualifier, right? You always issue a qualifier. Vladimir Putin, not a good guy. I don't like Vladimir Putin. He'd probably put me in a gulag and or sever my head from the rest of my body if he saw me. But I have to recognize the patience and discipline of that guy to sit there for 3 years as every nation on earth essentially called for regime change and said that we should drop nukes on Moscow, and he's awful. And he just bided his time and waited for the Russia narrative because the evil MAGA people are going to be stooges for Vladimir Putin. And then he just says, yeah, I'm kind of with her. I like Kamala. It's the most epic troll that he could possibly have done. But he's an intelligence officer, so you would expect nothing less.
Right. Patience, capabilities. Let's run somebody who's not an intelligence officer and is not even intelligent, but he is a member of Congress that you have a good relationship with. Here's Dan Goldman talking about this.
Congressman, let me first ask you for your reaction to what was charged yesterday by DOJ.
Well, look, it is the continuation of what we saw in 2016 and what Russia tried to do in 2020. And now it's confirmation that Russia is trying to once again meddle in our election, our presidential election, and that it's clear it's trying to do so to support Donald Trump. Who should also be included in the category of, at minimum, a useful idiot for Vladimir Putin. But what is, I think, a little bit more disquieting to me, at least, as someone who sits on this so-called weaponization of the federal government subcommittee in Congress under Jim Jordan's chairmanship, is that they have spent this entire Congress attacking the government for trying to stop malign influencers like Russia and using euphemisms like censorship and efforts to interfere in the First Amendment, also that they could pave the way for Russia to do exactly what it has now been charged with doing and sanctioned for doing.
Steve, what is he talking about?
I don't know. I was really distracted by the collar being over the lapel portion.
Why do they keep doing that? Tim Walz did the collar thing too. Folks, if you're not watching, if you didn't see that video clip, of which there's nothing really to see other than he has kind of like some weird things going on with his slick back hair. The right, what do you call that? Part of his collar is sticking over the top of his lapel on his jacket. And it's the same exact side that Tim Walz did. Is there some kind of secret society that they are a part of?
It's like the OK sign is used to be bad, but they tried to make that into like a white power thing. Maybe it's
like
the
this one,
collar
like this
over
one,
the
where they're like,
lapel method.
you know what? I was a diver. This is so I was a diver in the military, right? And so in dive training, you try to hammer it home. If you do this, a thumbs up. A thumbs up means we're going to the surface, which could kill you. So we do the OK symbol because it means okay. And you line it up like this and you take it from the center of your chest, and it's very specific. They teach you how to do that. So whenever you're doing something, okay, okay. So you send them the okay as a diver. I don't know if it's like a little dog whistle, but I think we should make the argument that is a dog whistle to like super rich sycophants for the Chinese.
I mean, I was able to cut through that a little bit where he was talking about foreign malign influence.
What did he say about the First Amendment? What is that? What was that? He was like, oh, they're protecting the First Amendment by attacking the First Amendment.
Thank you, Supreme Court Justice Amy Barrett, for signing off on this, by the way. She's the person who rendered the opinion that says that the FBI can, in fact, go to social media companies still and talk to them about censoring things that the FBI says, because they're the authority, is potentially foreign malign influence. And Dan Goldman has the gall to get up there and say, well, the weaponization committee is saying that that's censorship. Yes, that's the definition of censorship, actually. It's the government telling a media company what they can and can't share, regardless of where it comes from. That is censorship. And I don't trust the FBI, seeing as how they censored the Trannifesto the last year and a half to negotiate what actually constitutes what could be propaganda from Russia, particularly when all the propaganda we're being told is saying, hey, we don't want to send $170 billion over to an engagement anymore so that Zelensky can go buy like another Bugatti for his wife.
Hold that thought, because we're going to totally go there. I have a question for you. When did Russia go into Crimea?
During the Obama administration, I believe it was 2014.
Okay. And then when did they go back in again?
That was during 2022, February, when the tanks rolled into Ukraine.
And who was president then?
It's debatable. I think it was Kamala Harris.
Don't catch me off guard with stuff like that. You're giving me it straight. You're telling me, hold on, I want to do are you telling me?
You're just asking questions.
I'm just asking questions here. Are you telling me that the preferred candidate of Russia is Donald Trump, despite the fact that whenever the Democrats are in, Russia decides to run roughshod over their neighbors' boundaries and borders?
Well, if you listen to Vladimir Putin, thank you, Dan Goldman, for that pronunciation.
I wish I had a collar right now. If I had a collar right now, I'd flip it out on the right-hand side as a virtue
nice
signal
dog whistle for I'm an elitist is to try to throw in the accent on a particular name and then talk like a regular person the rest of the time. It's something that's unique amongst news anchors and politicians. So, but it's pretty clear just because we have a proof of concept that Vladimir Putin felt comfortable invading Ukraine under the Barack Obama administration and the Joe Biden administration, and then didn't do anything when it was sandwiched in between during the nice cream portion of the Oreo cookie.
It's so true. Also, for some reason, I guess the Biden administration has gotten off the we're going to try to tell you it was about inflation, and we're going to now just argue that it should have been called the Green New Deal for their nasty spending package. You're telling me that Vladimir Putin doesn't want this dude in charge? I'm going to play you a clip. Folks, we're all going to be dumber for having done it, but we'll do it together.
That through my investments, the most significant climate change law ever, and by the way, it is a $369 billion bill. It's called we should have named it what it was, but at any rate, the Department of Agriculture is able, from that legislation, to announce $7.3 billion.
What is his kryptonite again?
It's sandbags and gravity and grass.
And speaking numbers for some reason. Why did he raise his voice? He's like, $7 billion. And
he gets very excited to say numbers, particularly ones that end in TY for whatever reason. He likes to say 4T or 8T. It's this weird emphasis on the wrong syllable.
It's so weird.
Joe Biden apparently is teaching us all that in the final throes of senility and dementia, your ability to maintain a lie is the last thing that leaves, because he gives away the game. The Inflation Reduction Act was always the Green New Deal. And anyone that paid attention to it, or even just has a modicum of understanding that you can't spend a lot of money and expect that to bring down inflation, because inflation is a definition of having too much money.
It's basic economics. But
their economic advisor took music from Juilliard or something.
Yeah. I mean, he was probably good at something, just not running economic systems. Okay, a little bit further on this thing. There's a guy named David Korn. He's the editor for Mother Jones, conspiracy type dude on the political left, the hard left. And so he was really excited about this thing. I just wanted to show, because you talked about the billions going into Ukraine and all this kind of stuff. This is the sort of the hard left take on what's going on. They're super excited to be able to attack a Tim Pool, who is, I don't even know if he's like in the B tier. He's probably a C tier, not because he's not competent or not because he's not interesting. Like, I think a lot of his programs have interesting guests. He gets really good guests and they fly them all in. So their system is effective, but he's not like whatever the top strata is of people to attack. Like if the top strata is a Jesse Waters and a Greg Gutfeld and a Tucker Carlson, then you get below there and you've got sort of the Laura Ingraham and the Sean Hannitys. I put Sean Hannity lower because he just talks a lot. And some of the people that are sort of in that space, and maybe a Bongino and a Ben Shapiro or in BT, or like really competent, high level people listen to them. And Tim Pool's below that somewhere, just based on size and reach and audience. And so they're really excited about attacking him. So this is this kind of fun little take from this guy, David Korn. And then I'm going to show you a tweet that he had today, a video of Don Jr., specifically talking about money, where he said, I guess Russia got their money's worth from questions not asked by Tim Pool of Don Jr., who does the majority of the answers, who's also not accused of taking money from Russia. So anyway, this is just a fun little lineup of the insanity if you live on that world. Here's David Korn. Again, Mother Jones.
Well, we got to look at this a little bit in historical context. This isn't coming out of nowhere. This is now the third election in a row that the Russians have tried to intervene to help Donald Trump. They did it in 2016, and Donald Trump said it wasn't happening. He lied. He aided and abetted the attack. And the whole Republican Party, or most of it, and the conservative movement ended up agreeing with him because they didn't want to be caught cross swords with him on this point. So right there, he led them into this Russian denialism. And then in 2020, we kind of forget about this because Trump didn't win, but Ukrainian officials who were tied to Russian intelligence, according to whom? According to Trump's own Treasury Department, were putting out disinformation about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. It didn't work, but it made the election close. And the right wing was amplifying this stuff, Rudy Giuliani and others, Fox News, over and over again. So the Russians have a pretty clear idea about how to play this. It's nothing new for them. They've had years of experience, and here they are out there with these right-wing commentators, also with these websites that are out there and ginning up right-wingers to push these talking points as we get closer to the election. It's just been going on, and the right has just refused to acknowledge this.
I got to break in here because that was as much as I can handle. But was that an aging George Michael? I thought, is he even alive?
It looked like it, but I was again distracted that
Who was
time
the
by
guy
the
with
audio.
the white hair that's wearing the leather jacket that's sitting there looking all surly? Now I have to find out if George Michael is alive. He died.
And MSNBC, as much as it is a left-wing rag as a television organization, like if you're going to go on national TV, how about you don't set the laptop up in your bathroom? It creates problems with the echo of the audio.
I hate that people have room noise. Yeah, he died in 2016 per the internet, which means it must be true.
That's what Abraham Lincoln said.
But I really like this picture of him. I went and found, I had to go look for this just for you to look. Like, it's George Michael. Honestly, I'm going to throw that guy back on the screen for 1 second, just because, just look to the hard left of the screen, folks. Who is this dude?
Well, we got to look at this a little.
I don't know. It's just there. I don't mean to get distracted, but I'm
Was
easily
he
distracted.
actually defending the now completely proven to be a lie 51 intelligence officers claiming
They've defended it. Yeah, everything that's not true. And so here's him to this morning saying, looks like Russia got their money worth. And again, this is not Tim Pool, but this is Luke. I can't remember his last name. Radowski, I think is his name. So Luke is asking the question of Don Jr., who does the majority of the clip, neither of whom are accused of taking money from Russia. And actually, I don't disagree with anything that Don Jr. says here either. Colorful language here, folks. Don Jr.'s off the he's off the censorship realm. So here you go.
What's your opinion on the solution to the Ukraine war?
Cut off the money. It's the only way you get them to the table. Right? As long as, we're literally creating the oligarch class of billionaire in Ukraine with whatever's being siphoned off, whether it's Zelensky, whether it's this, while they send young men to die as cannon fodder on the front lines because they couldn't care less. It's fucking disgusting what's going on there, that it's allowed to happen, that we shut down anything. It's so obvious. Nothing's ever going to change there if the money keeps flowing. My father would have been like, hey, you got like one more month of this, and if you're not at the table, it's done. Yep. Guess what? Zelensky wouldn't have a chance if we shut it down. So he'd come to the table, and they'd come up with something.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's like no lies detected.
You've been on that program. Luke was reading that question off of a phone. Was that an audience member question? Did it originate even with Luke, or is he just relaying an audience question to the guests that they had that day?
Could have gone either way. A lot of times people will take notes on their phone. Like Tim's always on his phone during the show. And so are some of the other guests, and I've been on myself because the camera cuts around and usually it doesn't show you on there. Like reading it right off there, it's part of the etiquette that they have. Some people, they try to do this sit up where there's no notes, and you and I do that all the time. But there's plenty of programs, especially that's like roundtables, where people are just looking at phones. They had notes of stuff they wanted to cover down. So if he's read it off, but it could have been an audience question too.
But
in
regardless, it doesn't involve Tim Pool at all, other than that it's on his show. And those are just big names we're just going to throw out there and besmirch reputations. That's you again, Department of Justice. You're totally not a secret police force.
Correct. Exactly that. All right, let me go to another quick story. Let me first read from my friends over at Catholic Vote, who we're really appreciative of. I'm going to be doing a fun thing with them later on today. CatholicVote.org is where you guys can go. The next story is going to come from today's Loop, and I highly encourage you guys sign up for it. Again, CatholicVote.org. Just sign up for the Loop email. It's not going to cost you anything. It's going to give you really good information. They're not going to hit you up with a bunch of spam. You'll literally get one great email a day that's going to give you news based on faith, family, freedom. They do cover the abortion stuff pretty heavily, but that makes sense because they're a Catholic organization. They are not the Catholic Church. They're friends of mine that happen to be Catholic that are doing advocacy. They're trying to get out the vote for Donald Trump, so you can follow them on social media. They're also covering down on some of these churches that are burning, things that are happening, the fall of Western society, if you will, and the defense thereof. You can find them on social media places at Catholic Vote. And definitely follow them over on YouTube because our stuff's going to come out on there soon. I think there's like over 100,000 followers. So check it out at Catholic Vote or catholicvote.org. Take your pick. And let's do one of the stories that I've got from them today because I thought this was cool. And then we'll get into the Trannifesto stuff. Steve, I don't have you on the thing, so just 1 second. It is a Wall Street Journal analysis talking about the unprecedented surge of migrants that have literally remade the United States workforce. Recent Wall Street Journal article analyzes how an unprecedented surge of these people coming in have the overwhelming percentage of whom are working age, and that's the big thing, have remade the composition of the United States labor force. We're experiencing the largest immigration wave in generations, is what they talk about. The swelling of the population, the changing of the makeup of the labor force will likely reverberate through the economy for decades. And so I think that actually goes to the same thing as throwing a ton of money in. They threw a ton of money in and a bunch of people that don't belong here. And then they're like, yeah, obviously it's going to work. It goes back to my point. 12 of the last 16 years have been run by Democrats. Anything that's going on in the economy is basically on them.
And it's generational changes that nobody's even taken up. I just finished reading Invaded, J.J. Carroll's book, and he threw out one stat. It was, of all the population growth that we've had in the last few years, 77% of it is foreign-born individuals and their children. So that's a projection going forward. When you talk about the real numbers of people who have come across the border, it's somewhere in the area of 20 to 30 million people. And all the population growth is attributable to them. That is going to have a fundamental change on the culture of a country, regardless, good, bad. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying it is. And now you have the fact that all the job gains, just about for the reporting from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, are going to foreign people, not to Native Americans. And when I say Native Americans, I obviously don't mean indigenous peoples.
Us.
Not feathers. Just people that were born here. And then when you throw out the 818,000 jobs that they forgot to carry the one on, I guess, how many of those were for Americans versus foreign-born individuals?
It's a totally legitimate question. The other thing is it changes the culture of this country and the way that people who are here will accept things because they're from somewhere else. And it's not how we do it in America, but if they are able to add a voting block and a culture that doesn't go along. I got this crazy clip, and I'm going to play it with you only because it's not like, look how loony this is. This is like, what timeline are we living on? This could be in a dystopian movie, easily. The story is, the backstory on this, as I understand it, is that Britain is filling up prisons with dissidents and rioters and people on social media saying mean things on Facebook. And so they are considering this as an option. And it becomes an option in America as well if we have people that don't understand what America's about. Check this out.
Well, the solution is at the moment reportedly on the table. That's according to a story in the Telegraph this morning. Now, the Justice Secretary had already warned that the overcrowding of prisons here could lead to a breakdown of the law. Now, it's understood that Estonia could potentially be renting out its prison spaces due to the fact that half of its prisons are empty and its low crime rate. But as I said earlier, these are plans that are being reportedly being put on the table. We don't know yet for certain that that's what will happen. But we do know that the summer of riots that we had put extra pressure on the system here. It's the closest the system ever came here to sort of running out of capacity. The pinch points were particularly felt in the northeast and northwest of England. And there are already plans in place, the measures that were announced earlier this year, that prisoners could be released early after serving 40% of their...
We're going to rent out prison space from Estonia because they have low crime rates and they don't have them full because we need to put rioters from people who are doing public discourse. I mean, whoa, that's so dark to me. Also, why are they just not trying to copy Estonia's policies? Apparently they're working, whatever that looks like.
That's the question about all these problems that we have. We were talking about just this on AMRAD podcast. It was like, why don't we just do what we did a long time ago? We had better results then when it came to, I don't know, teaching kids how to read. We should just teach them the 3 R's, but we got to do something new and novel and fancy and make sure we pad the pockets of the teachers unions here. It's no different when it comes to criminal justice. They've evolved that, and they're going to go after people who say mean things, or they are claiming are mean things on Facebook, and they're going to put them in jail. Meanwhile, they're not going to take the rioters that are defacing public property in these historic areas and actually generating a legitimate risk to public safety. They're going to say, oh, well, that's just their culture. We have to not be oppressive to that. I mean, I guess you can make the case that jail cells are oppressive, so we have to be forgiving, and as a result of that, you have a country now that's in complete turmoil. And talk about the cultural aspect to it. I think it's 10 years running, if not more, that the number one name of new babies in London is Mohammed.
Well, it was either that or McLovin.
Perhaps, but I don't know if they like the American brand.
Have you seen
comedy.
Superbad? Tell me you've seen Superbad, because I feel like you might not have.
I've seen it in pieces, not as one continuous thing. God. And I'm failing. I haven't seen Tropic Thunder yet. Maybe you can send me your copy, because it's probably black.
My copy is digital. Yeah, I have Amazon. Listen, the whole point of the Superbad thing is he gets this fake ID and the name on it is McLovin. It's one name. And they're like, why did you choose McLovin for the name on your fake ID? And he's a child who looks like he's like 13 years old. And he was like, it was either that or Muhammad. And he was like, why was it either that or Muhammad? He was like, it's the most common name on the planet. Read a book. It's the most common name in London. Listen, when I stayed in London for 8 months, semester abroad. And this would have been like 2022 or 2023. And when I was there, I was in this kind of outskirts of it, in the outer zones. And we were in this area where there were a ton of Turkish people and Kurdish people. There was more halal shops within walking distance to me than British pubs. There was like one or two of those and like a half dozen halal shops, which is where you would go get groceries if you wanted to, unless you went to the Tesco's. So very, very weird to think that that's been going on for 22 years and that's come home to roost, but it changes the culture, which is the argument that I think, forget about the workforce, the culture.
I was in Sioux City, Iowa for 7 years. You go over the river, that's Nebraska, right? Mm-hmm. It's a 3-state area, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa. We would go, and all the Indian reservations that I worked on were in Nebraska. Cross over the river, and that was called South Sioux City. The county was a majority minority county, and a significant portion of it was Somali, because they would come in actually via Minnesota. All those NGOs would bring them in Minneapolis, and they would say, we don't really have a lot of room for you. And they would flood down to our area because there were the meat packing industries and ice cream packing industries and that manual labor. And they would buy up the real estate, put 13 families in a house, a 1,300 square foot house. And that entire county had been remade, and that's a rural county in northeast Nebraska. How often is that happening in a country? And in a country like Great Britain, it's an island. It's not even that large geographically. That's been compounding on them. They're just further ahead on this trajectory than we are.
Yeah, it's planned. Rose accurately said it in the chat. It's Cloud Pivot strategy, which we haven't talked about in a long time on this program, but something we used to hit all the time, which is to say overwhelm the resources. And the only answer is federal solutions. I've got a federal solution for you that I want to talk about. This came out in August. This is mid-August from, I can't remember what the website is. What are they called? EPIC.org, the Electronic Privacy Information Center. A number of people have covered it. I've sat in and talked to some attorneys about it. The Fifth Circuit ruled that geofence warrants are inherently unconstitutional. Interestingly enough, the Fourth Circuit ruled that they are totally fine. So we're going to have a conflict, and hopefully the Supreme Court comes down on the proper side of this. How much do you know about geofence warrants? And maybe if you want to explain it, if you got a good grasp on it for people.
It's a general warrant that you're able to basically drop a pin on a geographical location at a time frame and see every device that is in that area. And I think it's probably well-founded. The Fifth Circuit made the right decision because it's not particular to a person. You just are looking for data and people around there. You are looking in search of a criminal, not really looking at a person. That's a violation of their rights to do that, because look, you have no reason to expect that you're walking around in public that's going to be involved in some sort of criminal investigation. Perhaps the argument is, well, you have no expectation of privacy. Well, I do, to a certain extent, from the government being able to track all of my movements at all times.
So people can kind of grasp this. There is a crime that's being investigated. This is not, they do it in national security cases too, so that's another animal, and I can't really talk about it too much, but you can grasp what I'm talking about. There is a crime. Let's use the best case scenario of this being used in a way that we would feel the least worried about it. There's a bank robbery. And at that bank robbery, the bank locks down and the doors are barred by the robber. and they take whatever money they're going to get. So they get $7,564 out of the registers and some bait bills, and they put those all together. And then they're in the bank, let's say, for 9 minutes, and then they escape. And everybody stays in there and lays down and is scared or whatever, and the guard has been disarmed. And so what we would do is we would drop a geofence in there for that period of time, the 5 minutes before and the 10 minutes after, and you're looking for the 1, 2, or 3 signatures of cell phones that go running out the door and leave, get in a vehicle and leave at high rate of speed, going somewhere else. And so then you would go and find out what is that device identified to, generally using Google. And then you would say, okay, well, what is that Google account? Where does it normally live? And what's the pattern for that phone? And now you've identified your likely subject, and then you go and interview it and or arrest them. So that's the best way to do it. And the worst way to do it is a bunch of people are milling around on the National Mall on January 6, 2021, and some of them have crossed over an invisible barrier because the bicycle blockades were knocked down. And as they walk around in the past tense, the DOJ is able to say, you violated this space as a trespasser because we know the crime was committed. And so we've gone out and found every single person that was there. And now we're able to identify you conclusively, and we're going to bang down your door with a SWAT team.
It's the selective use of this tool, or actually overly broad use of this tool, and by a politicized agency. I mean, I'm thinking of actually the Dark Knight movie. That's basically what a geofence was at the end of the way that movie gets resolved. It's like, I have to find the Joker. What am I going to do? And they developed the technology. Like all of Gotham City, we're looking at every single person's cell phone, and we're able to find out where he is. And at the end of it, actually, the guy Fox says, like, I'm not going to work with you if you use this tool, and they destroy it. And I think that that's probably the best thing to do. You can't handle that ring of power. I mean, Batman can because he's fictional and he's awesome, but I don't trust the FBI to be able to handle that. They're going after 89-year-old women who survived a concentration camp because they are praying outside of an abortion clinic. They've clearly chosen a path here, and they're ill-equipped and unable and proven unworthy to handle a tool like this.
A last little thing I'm going to throw on there. I think that this is the same sort of decision the Supreme Court needs to come down and make, just like the Kylos versus U.S., which was a case that was decided about thermal technology and the ability to do thermal imaging. It's
just
not
drive down the street and look in people's houses. Yeah.
Right. And you're like, oh, like that roof is extra hot. There's probably a grow lab in there. And the odds are that there probably is, but you need to get a warrant if you want to do that. And so what happened, that's what Kylos decided, is that you're going to use some augmentation technology. People think that using a geofence warrant sort of has the same sort of instinct of being able to look at security cam footage. But because we're talking about a cell phone and all of the private data and all of the things that it reveals about you to know what cell phone you have, I think it's closer to having like a CT scan of every person there, because you're able to look inside their body. You're able to look inside and see how they're functioning. You're taking, it's only just a little time. It's a very, very short increment where we get to do that CT scan. I can only see you for 30 minutes. But I know everything that's going on in your body when I look through and I do that type of scan. So the invasiveness, I think, is going to require a new Supreme Court decision. I hope. And I hope they come down and say
it's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be hard. That's why we have constitutional guardrails that are set up. And that's why in an ideal world, the FBI actually sets up guardrails that make it more narrow. That's what the AGG DOM and the DIAG are supposed to establish, the Attorney General Guidelines on Domestic Investigations, Domestic Investigations Operations Guides, for those who don't speak fluent government acronym. Those are narrowing the FBI's ability to even operate within the constitutional guardrails, because they say it is that important to us. Right? Rigorous obedience to the Constitution is so important to us that we're going to rank it behind diversity.
Yes, exactly. All right. So I've thrown it on the screen now, folks. You can see it. Let me pull this up so I can interact with it a little bit. This is, there we go. This is the Trannifesto. That's what it looked like. It was a red notebook. It's a Meade notebook signed with the name Aiden, which is the name that Audrey Hale, the shooter at the convent school in Tennessee, took on. And so we're just going to kind of look at it. Steve, you have some impressions of it. I'm going to kind of scroll through it while you talk, but there's some really interesting stuff right up in the front. Why does my brain not work right is a big question. These are like scribbles, and this is angry, like sort of teenage looking writing, very angsty. Not the writing of a, 28-year-old woman.
It's certainly not the writing of a 28-year-old person, and certainly not the writing of a 28-year-old male.
Certainly not. No, because I was born wrong is what's written in here. And so we're just kind of looking at these. There's like love, and there's nature, and there's everything hurts. This is kind of sad. There's some people that seems to, there's some hearts, maybe some people that passed away, or maybe when they're
a lot of animosity against God too. Okay. Seems like kind of a hate crime if you were to actually assess what went on there, where this person specifically identified a Christian school to go out and murder 6 people, 3 of them being children, and a lot of odes to her identity of being a girl who felt like she needed to have a beard. And then on top of that, talking nonstop about white privilege being a problem, which is unconnected, you would think, to shooting up kids in a school at some point. But my takeaway was, one, the FBI knew this, and they told Tennessee authorities to keep it under wraps under the narrative that it was some sort of a blueprint to carry out a mass shooting, which it is in fact not. It's just a look behind the ideology that generated that incident from happening. So the FBI lied because they wanted to protect this ideology. They like it. They want to see it progress and expand. And then something that's not been talked about, you and I have talked about, it was like the Super Bowl, right? The officers of Nashville PD who responded and did a textbook example of how you address an active shooter. You cannot criticize everything they do. That needs to be shared with every single law enforcement agency around the country of do what they did. It's perfect.
Why were those guys not given the Presidential Medal of Freedom for the service they did?
They were not only not recognized, but because we had to memory hold this entire thing, that footage will not be shared. That will, in effect, allow law enforcement to address future. And we live in a free country. This will, in fact, happen, as we saw what happened in Atlanta.
This apparently is the type of stuff that could be a blueprint for a mass shooter. This is one of the writings on the page here. This is coming from page 5. I hurt bad enough to know enough that I need to die. That's the entire page. There's no substance to what this is. The internet is dangerous. This is also kind of goofy. People want to scam you for your money. Money is filthy. I hate life.
Was she commenting on RT trying to scam commentators on the right?
This is really sad. And the other sad and scary thing is if you had seen this, and apparently there was a therapist involved with this person, like you see this kind of thing, there's nothing healthy about this person. That person needs help. I've worked in the mental health field as a paramedic, which makes me a lot less sympathetic than real counselors. My wife is the sympathetic ones of us. There's some people that need to be put in a room. They need to be put in a room. They make terrible decisions. We had a gal that actually was in our psych ED that came in because she was in her car, decided to kill herself, and jumped out of a moving car with her 2 kids in the back seat. You need to be looked at. You've made terrible decisions, and you're a liability not only for the people around you, but also for your own children, your own family. If you're writing this kind of stuff, and this is how it goes, if this is just you scribbling it out, look, I've seen what women write, grown women. My wife keeps journals and diaries, and I've looked over her shoulder and seen what it's organized and it's neat and it's not chaotic. This indicates a chaotic mind to me and someone who's having a real problem. And there's nothing in here that needs to be hidden. That's the real part. The fact that they fought it tooth and nail, it's so goofy to imagine that that's what our FBI was lobbying on behalf of. For me, I don't understand who was the one making that argument.
Which is what takes me back to the meme of the Austin Powers woman. It's like, oh, we got caught lying about this, so we got to go indict the Russians and Hamas.
Well, good for the Tennessee Star for getting what you're seeing are pictures actually that somebody with an evidence glove, we can actually see this on the screen. There's somebody who's got a blue nitrile glove taking this picture. There's some very longhand sort of organized thoughts. There's a lot of disorganized thoughts. There's so much of this stuff talking about hurting and pain, and people that are in chronic pain make terrible decisions. People that are in psychic pain make terrible decisions. There's a reason why some of them need inpatient therapy. It's a real thing. It doesn't mean it's always the solution. They probably shouldn't be around firearms. Where was this person's family? Apparently lived with mom and dad? Is that my memory?
I believe so. I believe that was it. But again, that's sort of a testament to how this entire story was memory hold. We were just moving on to the next thing. I mean, and this just is unrelated to what we're talking about here, but I was looking into Laken Riley. Remember Say Her Name? Where the Republicans were at the State of the Union trying to invite her parents because her skull got rearranged by an illegal alien. You know that the defense is moving to suppress evidence and his confession in that case, and there's a chance he might walk because apparently being an illegal alien, you get constitutional rights in this country now. And only because that name, for whatever reason, providentially popped into my head, did I even look it up? And it's a story that's from this week. Nobody's talking about that.
The thing that I guess is so crazy about all of it is that this is the argument. I think that the Wall Street Journal's piece and the one that we just saw covered from Catholic Vote, it changes the movement. It moves the narrative in the country. When you change the demographics, you change the values and what is accepted. And you and I and the way we grew up would not accept this sort of thing as normal. But if you don't know normal and you're like, oh, I guess that's just what Americans do. They're gender confused weirdos. I just came here for a job. I'm going to work minimum wage under the table or whatever, a better wage under the table because they don't have to pay taxes on it. And yeah, every once in a while, they just like some goofy female dresses up and shoots kids, or some guy puts on a dress and goes and shoots kids, or some young kid decides to solve his problems that way. Apparently, there was a really abusive situation that was happening down outside of Atlanta, and that may be the case. It's like, be transparent. Oh man, there's some pictures of like this weird picture right here that I'm looking at of looks like somebody's butt and like just childish drawings. This looks the opposite of everything male. All you'd have to do is say, male or female wrote this. I could show this to you. You have investigative experience. I show you this journal. We've been scrolling through it, male or female.
Loopy J's and G's in there. It's definitely a female.
Yeah, white nothingness. This is not how men write or talk. And so that wouldn't it be nice instead of confirming insanity, someone who's like, look, I know that you're a troubled female. We got to help you figure this out because this is just what it is.
This is good. The pressure to do the 180 degrees different in our culture now, where somebody has a problem wrong between their ears and we think, well, we're just going to affirm that and instead we'll change you physically, as opposed to doing what we've done the entire length of human history and said, something's wrong up there. Let's work on that because what's going on here is reality and you need to conform to reality. And shame is actually a good thing in that case.
I know we're going to have to let you go here. The last thing I'm just going to make comment on is I've scrolled through this whole thing and I'm doing it on purpose as we just kind of lazily throw. What I don't see is an ops plan. You and I have both planned tactical operations. We've both been on tactical operations. I see no blueprint for the apocalypse of transgender or otherwise people shooting up schools. I just don't see it. I don't see any layout, and it's certainly not in the text.
No, nothing there. And this was all a pretext to hide the fact that this was a deranged woman who was under the misconception that she could change to a man and had flooded herself with a bunch of hormones because she has the buying power of a 28-year-old woman as opposed to a 14-year-old kid and did it to herself. And we're just going to affirm that as opposed to saying this is a problem with our society and the drugs are having a problem. But really, it's just a societal problem where we're letting crazy people live out their true selves, which are not, in fact, true. And she took matters into her own hand because she was completely given over to a demonic belief that white privilege and transgenderism needed to be somehow fought for and little kids needed to die in that battle. And it's just all the fault needs to lay at the feet of our law enforcement, particularly at the federal level, because they hid this from the American people just so they could keep the narrative going that is an affirmative good, and is definitely not.
Buddy, thanks for joining me today. I know you got a call to jump on, so I will plug AMRAD when you're gone, but thanks for being here. And you're going to miss out on the palate cleanse, which I shared with you earlier, and it's equally dumb.
It's solid, Sarah fans. Make sure you stick with the show. And we'll see you guys next week.
It's so bad. All right, I was going to ask you, okay, before you leave, who is the top action star of the 80s? And second question is, who would be the best action star singer of the 80s? Go.
Bruce Willis on both accounts because Die Hard is the perfect movie, but Arnold Schwarzenegger has to get it by default.
Okay, good enough. All right, Steve, good seeing you, buddy. Have a great weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. So Steve weighed in. I have at least one of the top contenders for the greatest action star of the 80s singing a song that you would not expect. Again, I do think all this stuff is really hard to read. It's hard that they hid it when it's clearly not what it was intended to be. So it's another example of why I'm a little bit also on the fence with anything DOJ puts out when it comes to indictments, and whenever they're going to have these non-actionable ones. I still think that the primary purpose of what was done in the FARA case and so on was basically to smear the name of people that are conservative commentators, not all of whom I like, but I'll always cut fair on it. And I think that the key is that they named these people in a way such that they could be unmasked quite easily, and that is not common. That is not the goal when you are writing these things. The copy and paste specifically so that Company 1 was outed. I think there's probably more to come. I think that they have a lot in there, and I would highly advise, should any of them happen to hear this, they should not, whether it be a Benny Johnson or any member of the staff, whether it be Tim Pool's people or any of the folks that were caught up in this, Taylor Hansen and so on, do not engage and speak with the FBI, because even as a so-called victim, the FBI can open up all of the information on you. They can do the FISA information, and they know when you're lying because they've been reading your stuff. And you can still get hit with a Michael Flynn style 18 U.S.C. 1001 charge. Lying to the FBI. It's really the false statement statute. false statements are still false statements, whether you are being investigated as the victim of this thing or whether or not you're actually considered to be the subject of the investigation, because there is no differentiation on the federal side, particularly one that is motivated by politics. It's the thing that we talk about here. That's what weaponization looks like, and that's what we hate. Let me do just kind of a rapid fire punch. Mike Lindell's company, MyPillow.com. You guys can support them by going to MyPillow.com/Kyle. You'll get the same discounts that you'd get from anybody else, including some of the influencers we mentioned. But we get the benefit from it. And also, they just went public with Frank's Speech. I'm friends with Joe Oldman, who's the new COO over there. Go check them out if you're interested. MyPillow.com/Kyle, KYLE. Promo code Kyle if you just happen to be on the website, and check that. Also, we'll just do kind of a wrap up for the week. Mad Hat Jerky is another one of our affiliates out there if you're looking for a great snack. Some of you ordered at 1 a.m. last night. What are you guys doing? What's going on? Who's getting jerky at 1 a.m.? Maybe you're on the West Coast. It's madhatjerky.com/Kyle, or use the promo code Kyle. Save yourself 20%. Fantastic. My buddies at Shield Arms. If you're looking for a gun, this is a weekend that you might want to go out there and do some shooting. Go check them out at Bass Pro or Cabela's. But if you're going to order it through the website and save yourself some money. Save 5% site-wide on any of their accessories or also even on their firearms using promo code KYLE at Shield Arms. Yeah, that's all the good stuff. Okay, can I give you guys a 5-star review? It's very short and sweet, and I would have saved this for Steve, but it just says Friday's podcast, 50 stars, however many stars that are. Great way to start the weekend. I hope you enjoy it. Coming from Seek the Kingdom, who we've seen before. Thanks for the 5-star reviews. You can leave your own on Apple, and your palate cleanse going into the weekend. Possibly the greatest action movie star ever doing a song you never expected. You guys remember Bone Thugs?
Tell me what you're gonna do when there ain't nowhere to run. When judgment comes for you, what you gonna do when there ain't nowhere to hide. When judgment comes for you, cause it's gonna, I should have put the bloody bleed this is some Charlie in the buffet's last money. And I'm gonna miss everybody on the eye, looking them up to the prayer. Can't be blind, there's no opportunity for me to say. Please stay probably, stop it, please, bleed. And the blabber, play, good play, who's slap, stable, but 5 days. God is who we play, even though the devil's all up in my face, but we're keeping me safe and in my place. But it was a Bible, but double blue, set the blabber.
It just keeps going. I keep listening for it to go like, is this going to be there? I probably played that 20 seconds too much. But you had to know that it just keeps going with the blah, 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 blah. It's so bad. Yeah, Arnold has really fallen off in his older years. He says, screw your freedom. I used to love doing Arnold impressions for whatever that's worth. Arnold was my favorite. And Steve and I were talking about the college phenomenon that we experienced where you'd be able to do the soundboards and you'd call up and you'd be like, I just want to ask you a bunch of questions. Who's your daddy? And what does he do? But singing Bone Thugs and Crossroad, probably not where Arnold needs to land in retirement. So it's possible. Maybe he needs some mental health therapy as well. I hope you guys get some mental health therapy by going out into the world. Go hang out with your kids. Go paddle. Go get some water time, touch some grass, get off social media, get away from the news cycle. It'll still be there on Monday, and we will be as well. If you want to join us in a great community, do so on Locals. Again, KyleSerafin.com. Thanks to all of our subscribers. And start leaving us those messages for next Thursday's call-in show. KyleSerafin.com for the Locals community. You don't have to be a paid subscriber. You can just jump on if you want. All right. Bless all of you. Thank you for supporting us. Thanks for making sure we don't have to turn to Russia Today to get paid. I don't know what I would do with $100,000 a week. We'd have to have some really, really cool gatherings. That's probably not happening anytime soon. So until then, we'll see you guys on Monday. Hang in there. It's only going to get weirder in the last couple weeks, but we'll get through it together. All right. I'll see you after the weekend.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.